I have no idea. But we're going to go to, since I spent time in this goddamn thing, we're going to do this. And then we're going to go. Oh, wait, people are still on. Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear us?
How about now? Anything? Bueller?
We're waiting to hear from people. We were still streaming. Got it. Thank you, Nelson.
Got it.
Well,
Thanks,
that's
Nelson.
interesting to note for the future. If the audio goes out, we can leave the streaming going with Restream, restart OBS, and then we're in business.
Interesting. And we, you guys, I know you
patience,
guys
everybody.
saw, were trying to help us out, but we absolutely could see us talking into the microphone, see the spikes,
Yep.
and stuff. So that's
Would you like to
interesting.
go to May, my love?
Sure, but yes.
Oh, you just want to let this run?
No, I want you to tell them that this is the only way.
Oh, this is the only way we can show a clip of the movie because they have all these algorithms that scan not just the audio, but just straight up video. We got copyright struck for the Van Halen stuff from having Panama playing in the background. So I thought this was a clever way to get you guys to see just a little tiny bit of the movie. So we are all on the same page. But this will probably get a copyright strike too. And of course, we could get away with this, except then it gets blocked from YouTube Live, and then anybody on YouTube can't watch it. So now we're going to go to the main. Here we go, and shaboop. Hello.
Can't see me. That's what I was trying to say before, but I didn't know how.
I did not see that. There we
Yeah.
go. Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Guys.
We've got a lot of sunlight coming into the underground lair because we put in a new
Ooh.
we put in a new sunlight shaft today.
It was our morning project.
It was our morning project. We're off to a hell of a start, you guys. Hell of a start here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to episode number 57 of StorySmack. We have one hell of a show for you today. This should be pretty fun. This is StorySmack, which is A's line.
Oh, sorry. This is episode 57 of StorySmack. I was wondering, do we need to start recording?
No.
Okay.
No, we don't.
That's what got me distracted. This is episode 57 of StorySmack, the podcast about stories and storytellers in the world of pop culture. My name is A.B. Sigler. I'm an audiobook narrator and a founding partner at Empty Set Entertainment.
And my name is Scott Sigler, #1 New York Times bestseller, and I'm sitting on Frog One. Come on, Irv.
Today we're talking about the 1972 movie The French Connection. It was a 5-time Academy Award winner.
And it was directed by William Friedkin, who went on to direct The Exorcist. So 2 very different movies, but both have quite a bit of blood and other bodily fluids.
And I think we should talk about that a little bit later. They are very different purposefully. Not just their script and subject matter, but Friedkin's approach to it too, which I found is interesting. We are drinking every Saturday. We drink, or every time we do a Story Smack, we drink a cocktail from Shaker and Spoon. This is not an advertisement. We just were
they
gifted.
Can pay us if they want to, though.
Yes,
we'll be
we
happy.
were gifted
We'll
this
be happy.
delightful subscription. Shaker and Spoon, you get a box of stuff, and then you buy a bottle of alcohol. So that way they don't have to ship you the alcohol and worry about breakage or whatever. And this is called a Nippon Cooler. This is made with Japanese whiskey. You don't get a lot of mixed drinks with whiskey. This one's lovely, actually. It's very light and fruity, but you can still taste the smoke of the whiskey.
So cheers to all of you if you're having a beverage, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, imaginary, whatever. We are happy to be spending a little bit of time with you on this Saturday. Talk about this crazy movie. First of all, Gene Hackman, done, end of story. That's all that needs to be said. This movie has Gene Hackman, in case you did not know.
And in case you didn't know, he's a huge fan of Gene Hackman.
big fan. Taut, gritty performance. This is the one that really put him on the map. Although, he was in what was the one before this? He was in a big one before this.
Before this,
before the French Connection came out, he was on.
He was in TV for a dozen years, so I'm not sure. There's probably one.
He had a big movie.
I'll look it up.
I'm doing a pretty bad job. We'll do that. But you know what? He was a detective. He's an NYPD detective in this movie. You know what he is? Wild card.
Uh-oh. I want your gun and your badge.
They took away his gun and his badge, and they took him off the case. Come on, Irv. Come on.
Is the one you're talking about Bonnie and Clyde?
Bonnie and Clyde.
Okay.
That's the one, Bonnie and Clyde. But this was the movie that won Gene Hackman the Academy Award for Best Actor, which we're going to talk
Academy
to.
Award,
His first Academy Award. We're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up. And it really put him on the map, obviously. And, hey, go.
Popeye Egan is the name of Gene Hackman's character. Popeye Doyle, I mean. What was his first name? Something.
Buddy, we're going to get to him in a second.
Anyway,
let's see here.
Popeye Egan, Eddie Egan is the actual New York City narcotics police detective that Popeye Doyle is based on. And so this is a true story. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. I will say that Eddie Egan, the actual detective, was in The French Connection, and he wasn't even a big part. He played Walt Simonson.
It's so cool, though, that the guy this is based on, cop, put him in the movie, give him a role. It was a big role, too.
Oh, and he went on. Papa Egan went on to have a bunch of a Hollywood career, too.
Okay.
After he retired from the New York City police force.
After he retired from the New York City. You know why? Because he was also a wild card.
Yeah, there's a ton, actually. If you want to talk a little bit about it, I have a ton of info.
We're going to get to that. About the real French Connection?
No,
about Egan. Go for it. Yeah, talk about him.
So he was born and raised in New York City. I'll skip most of the non-movie making stuff, but this is a screenplay based on a non-fiction book published in 1969 by an author named Robin Moore, who wrote about the actual police case that The French Connection is about, and then that became a screenplay, and then William Friedkin bought the screenplay and directed the screenplay. So he actually some of the things that are in the movie are quite factual. He sort of sniffs out this problem, and he had a very unconventional approach to policing. There are just a couple of my favorite stories. He spent 15 years with the New York City Police Department. He became quite famous among his colleagues and his callers for that's my dog for unconventional policing. He dressed up as a hot dog vendor, as a deaf-mute beggar, as a priest, as a theatrical agent and a theatrical actor, all to be in a position where he could make arrests. And my very favorite one, let me find the one. He posed as Santa Claus one Christmas season, and he got in a big Santa suit, and he had a brass bell, and he had a little donation thing, and he just would walk down the streets in the Bronx and like ring the bell. And every time he rang the bell twice, one of his colleagues would come out from hidden somewhere and arrest drug pushers who he had watched they didn't think that he was a big problem because he was Santa Claus and he was collecting alms or whatever, but he was actually undercover, and so he would just keep ringing the bell, and if he rang it double in this hand, there was a drug bust going on right there, and if he rang it double in this hand, there was a drug bust or a drug deal going on over there, and they made the bust. And that year they made 37 collars in the Christmas season, which was quite a whole lot.
Right, sorry about that, you guys. People at the door barking dogs. I'm out of breath. Whew. Okay.
So then after The French Connection came out in 1972, Egan asked to be retired from the police force, and instead Internal Affairs brought up accused him of withholding drugs from some of his busts and failing to appear in court when he was scheduled to testify. And he was dismissed. He was fired without recompense and without a pension from the New York City Police Department. And he definitely had, just like Popeye Doyle does in the movie, he had a kind of a brusque, brash personality. Mm-hmm. And he just left and then sued the department, and the case was totally dismissed. It was not true, and then he retired to Florida, where he died in 1995 of colon cancer.
Okay, that's
Egan, but I was talking,
Is this after his movie career then?
Yeah.
Okay, after his movie career.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what they did? They literally took his gun and his badge. That's how much.
Did take his gun and his
how
badge.
much of a wild card he was. So we have a lot to unpack here. We're kind of off because I thought that was me, but. This movie won Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Gene Hackman, and Best Adapted Screenplay.
And then you talk about this too. King has.
I'm a huge Gene Hackman fan. He has been nominated for 5 Academy Awards. He's won 2. He was nominated in Bonnie and Clyde, which for Best Supporting Actor. And then in 1971, he was also nominated. Bonnie and Clyde was 68. In 71, it was I Never Sang for My Father, which I've not seen. Nominated for Best Supporting Actor, did not win. 72, French Connection. French Connection was made in 71, but it was for the 72 Academy Awards. He won Best Actor. He was nominated for Best Actor in 1989's Mississippi Burning, and then he won his second. And, of course, the amazing Unforgiven, 1993, won for Best Supporting Actor One of my favorite movies.
It's kind of crazy to imagine that huge, long, storied career, these powerful, powerful movies that lots and lots of people know, 2 Oscar wins. Seems like it's a
very competitive field. I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems crazy. It seems like it should be better than that.
Well, now there's the fun thing. I guess it's not fun at all, but the fun thing going on with the Tony Awards.
I don't know.
And that there are so few productions that actually ran long enough to be considered for the Tony Award because of the COVIDs. And so now there's one guy, if I have this correct, there's one guy who is nominated for the best male lead in a musical, and he is the only guy in the category. And if
I'm going to bet on him.
He still has to get 60% of the vote. So he's the only guy nominated, and if he doesn't win, that's going to be hard. That's going to be hard to live down.
But back in '72, the French Connection, for its time, was a great movie. We'll talk a little bit about why it might not be as productive today. It might not be quite the same reception today for a handful of reasons. But back in the day, it was very well received. Not every critic liked it or anything, but it also had a huge amount of competition for the Oscars that year, and for all the critics' love that year. It was up against Fiddler in the Roof as an Oscar nomination, A Clockwork Orange, The Last Picture Show by Peter Bogdanovich. There were tons and tons and tons. So, this was the start of a class. I don't know if Howard's in the audience, but I bet he is. This was the start of a class that they started to call New Hollywood, or the Decade of Influence in the United States. There was something called the Decade of Influence in Europe, especially in France in the 60s for movie making. And then in the 70s, the New Hollywood era came here, and you start to see movies like this, sort of real, gritty. The characters are the stunt drivers. The huge driving scene you see under the elevated train in New York with Gene Hackman behind the wheel. Gene Hackman was behind the wheel.
Yeah.
So it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a wild. It was a scripted fight, just like anything else.
Sure,
but he was still the driver, and I find these things very, very interesting. And I don't think that they would happen today in Hollywood.
No, you're not going to have a guy who's nominated for Best Supporting Actor driving a car and smashing into shit. That's not how things
was
work.
Best Actor. He was.
No, but the movie before.
Oh, right. Yes. But that was actually the same thing. The director class that year was also outstanding.
It's huge. Let's see, we have Stanley Kubrick for A Clockwork Orange, Norman Jewison for Fiddler on the Roof, also the most on-the-nose name of any director for any movie ever, Peter Bogdanovich for The Last Picture Show, John Schlesinger for Sunday Bloody Sunday, and then, of course, this movie with Mr. Friedkin, who then went on to do The Exorcist after this. Very different movies.
Yeah, and I had mentioned that earlier, that William Friedkin made specific choices. This one is a very superficial, purposefully superficial. So when I say superficial, I'm not actually dogging it. Oops.
That was the directorial intent.
That was the directorial intent, was to be sort of surface level with this. There are lots of police procedural tropes in this movie. Lots of rowdy cops roughing up bad guys. Lots of taking on a different role if you're going to be the good cop or the bad cop or the whatever. But also there's very, very, very precious little internal dialogue or monologue for any of these characters. We never find out. Spoiler, I should have said this earlier. Spoiler alert. Obviously, it's a StorySmack. But at the end of the movie, Popeye Doyle kills one of his own by accident. It's a total accident, but he does it. And I bet he spends potentially 1 second of screen time, and that's it. He kills a friend of his, and he doesn't do any internal understanding of that. The low-level mules, it's a drug running story, and there's a couple that are kind of like the peons.
It's Sal and Angie, Sal and Angie at the candy shop.
Yeah, and Sal and Angie, you very often, you see them interacting with each other because they run a candy shop diner thing, but you see through the window of the store, so you can't even hear what they're saying. They have no internal life. And I find that very interesting when you think about the next thing that William Friedkin made was The Exorcist, which was all about what's inside. And I find those interesting, especially because I found watching, and I've seen The French Connection before, but I found it difficult to watch today, having been in lockdown for 8 months.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe my executive function needs shorter, more fulfilling things because it's hard to just sit in the same living room for 7 months. This movie reminded me that we no longer have entertainment that is maybe 3 storylines that take 2.5 hours to tell.
Right.
We watch YouTube for 4 minutes, get bored, and switch to something else. We scroll through Facebook nonstop, and those things, I think, would make it difficult for this movie to get made today.
So it's not that much of a deep dive into the internal grittiness of the police life and cop life. It's very superficial, but so much of this movie is now so iconic. Of course, the crazy chase scene, which has been celebrated for many years. And I'd heard about the chase scene before I actually watched the movie a few years ago, and was like, okay, whatever, it's a chase scene. But when you watch it, it's a bit of a crazy, it's a crazy chase scene with people making really bad decisions. The guy with a gun at the front of the train. He's like, get back, and the other guy's like, no, you got no way out of here, and he doesn't get back, and then he gets shot, and like it's a rough way to go.
There's a ton of those too, because also the guy doing the shooting. Smart enough to know he's a grown-ass man. He knows he's not getting off that train unless he jumps off the L, and yet he's still willing to shoot his way out.
And the scenery was very stark. There's a lot of scenery chewing of while Frog 1 and the other bad guy are enjoying the high life of New York. They're eating, they're drinking, they're having 3-hour dinners, etc. And then there's Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider freezing the day nuts off. But it was shot in winter, right?
Yeah, it was shot in winter on purpose because that's sort of the right light in New York City that they wanted and that kind of thing. And it's also, you see them, when you see them shivering in the cold on a stakeout, they're shivering in the cold on a stakeout because it's 30 degrees in New York City. And I think you sort of take that for granted a lot because now we can CGI all that stuff. But if you see their breath because they're standing on a street corner freezing, they're standing on a street corner freezing.
Yeah. And you mentioned apparently Gene Hackman is an attractive human being.
Yeah.
But
so
the rest of the cast, and I'm not saying Roy Scheider's ugly. I'm not saying this.
And it's not so much the whole cast, but the whole vibe here. Thanks for reminding me. We talked when we watched it. We were talking about this. There are things about this movie, lots of things that probably don't happen today. I mentioned the scene cutting, but also a handful of the lead characters or important characters or substantial characters are not Hollywood pretty in any way, shape, or form. There's a guy who tests the purity of the heroin that's coming into town, and his whole scene is right up in his face, literally right up in his face. Yeah. He has terrible front teeth. He has a scrawny little mustache. He has a terrible haircut nobody fixed, and I'm sure nobody decided on that haircut for him. And that's okay because he was a drug runner, and so we don't have that anymore. Like if we made the French Connection today, that might be Chance Crawford, roughed up and dirtied up or whatever.
Sure.
But he'd still have perfect veneered teeth. He'd still have gorgeous contact lenses. He'd have all that stuff.
And Nelson in the chat room brought up a good point that not just the cast, but New York City was ugly as hell.
Oh yeah,
back then
this
too.
is the
This
same.
is the pre-scrubbed New York City when Times Square was just a nasty, nasty place.
And a goodly amount of this movie takes place in the Bronx, which is like the age of Fort Apache. And Fort Apache, the Bronx is a movie, but it was also the Bronx at the time. It was pretty rough and tumble. That's a really good point.
Tumble. What we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to go over here and we're going to talk about the cast. We're going to talk a little bit, not too much of a deep dive, because outside of a couple of guys in this, a lot of people who are not career actors, celebrated actors, etc. But of course, Mr. Gene Hackman, French Connection, Royal Tenenbaums, The Poseidon Adventure. If you haven't seen The Poseidon Adventure, do yourself a favor.
The original.
The original. Do yourself. You don't need to watch Fergie. That's okay. The original Poseidon Adventure. Gene Hackman. Cue that bad boy up and watch it. He is lights out. And then a movie that Gene Hackman is not celebrated for, but is very influential in my work in the Crypt series, is Crimson Tide with another amazing actor, Mr. Denzel Washington.
Yep.
Just some of the scenes between those two guys in that movie are wow, they're so good.
And there's so much. I am not as big of a fan as Unforgiven as Scott is, but clearly his performance was wonderful. I think I'm glad I never will watch another Clint Eastwood directed movie, but okay. But The Conversation, that was an enormously lovely, really powerful movie. He had so many huge, huge wins.
Yep.
It's amazing to think about him 12 years into his career when he makes this movie.
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman.
Okay.
Like he's got some TV behind him. He's got a few movies behind him, but he's not a newbie actor here.
No.
And you can totally tell. But then there's also
Roy Scheider, who in the world, the borderline world of sci-fi and speculative fiction, you're right, is Roy Scheider. Of course, there was, I think Outland was the one, if I don't remember correctly on that one. But he did Jaws, which is a seminal movie in American cinema and world cinema. He did Blue Thunder. So there's two movies right there where you have to ask yourself, is Blue Thunder a cop procedural or is it a sci-fi movie? Because you got that tricked out helicopter. And is Jaws is that a character drama or is it a monster movie? It's a giant monster movie, you know?
Yeah, and so earlier we were sort of talking about this decision to make this sort of stark surface level look of the French Connection be I don't want to go so far, be so precious as to say it's another character or anything, but the set design and the scouting and all that kind of adds all of that to this rough and tumble, do it like lots of these movies, like Jaws was at the time, like this. Is it a horror movie or is this a police procedural or kind of a gritty look at the ugly underbelly of New York City kind of thing?
And then we have Mr. Fernando Ray, who played, the character's name is Frog One. So I don't think that's too insulting. There's a lot of insulting shit in this movie.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that in a minute. But Fernando Ray was a Spanish movie actor, apparently very celebrated in Spain, primarily known for his role in this movie. And then one of my favorite characters in this, the backstories of the people in this are amazing. Mr. Bill Hickman, this actor is better known for his prowess as a stunt driver. His work in Bullet, 1968, is legendary, where he drove the black Dodge Charger 440 Magnum that was pursued by Steve McQueen in his Ford Mustang 390 GT.
Oh, what a great movie.
I'd love to do that one someday. And then we get into these gentlemen. Sorry, I got these backwards. There's Eddie Egan. This is, see if I have this right.
I can do it if you want. So this we've talked quite a lot about him.
This is Sonny Grosso, and this is Eddie Egan. Those are the two guys, right?
So Sonny Grosso, go back a second. He plays Saul, right?
Yep.
And this photo of him is probably a dozen years after he was in The French Connection. In The French Connection, he's this Italian stallion, Saturday Night Fever, kind of like good-looking Bronx or Queens boy. I'm not exactly sure where the store is set, but he's this Italian kid from New York, and he totally looks it, and he's gorgeous, and he's still gorgeous here, but it's a dozen years later. He's got the different hairdo and everything
I'm just
else.
not good at figuring out if guys are good looking or not. That's a gorgeous gentleman. All right, cool.
I mean, he was cuter when he was 12 years younger, but that's true. He
was very intimidating in the French Connection.
Quite intense on purpose.
Like if that guy's busting you, you're like, okay, I'm just going to tell the cops whatever they want to know because
Yeah,
I don't want this heat. I don't want this heat.
Exactly.
And he went on to become a television producer. Stuff. He did lots of made-for-TV movies. He's no longer with us, but he also did the Heat of the Night TV show. So if you are old enough to remember the Heat of the Night TV show, he was the producer of that one. Now, this is, I admit, I'm supposed to know many things. I did not know that this was based on a true story.
Yeah. Well, and what's...
He explained it. I'd already seen it once, and I still didn't know.
And my favorite part about that is you'd watched it, we watched it again, and when you call it up on, was it Netflix or Amazon Prime, wherever it was, it literally says, based on a true story, comma, Popeye Doyle, blah, blah, blah. And after and so we're done watching it, and it's back on that screen, and he says, holy shit, this was, oops, swear jar, holy shit, this is a true story? And I'm like, it says, yes.
Kevin Capizzi in the chat room points out that Mr. Grosso, it's his butt chin. That's what throws me off. I can't.
Well, exactly.
A cleft chin, a butt chin, either way, I can't tell. So I'm just going to read you guys a little bit about the actual French Connection. Feel free to go look this up on my own personal site that I make every day called Wikipedia. I hope you like it. It is the French Connection was a scheme through which heroin was smuggled from Turkey to France and then to the United States and Canada. It started in the 1930s, reached its peak in the 60s, was dismantled in the 70s. It was responsible for the vast majority of heroin used in the U.S. at the time. It goes back to the 30s. Heavy stuff here. It started in Marseille, France, 1937. It was run by the Corsican gang and gang leader Paul Carbone. This is where it gets really good. The Corsican gang was protected by the Central Intelligence Agency, from America. And the SDECE after World War II in exchange for working to prevent French communists from bringing the old port of Marseille under their control. So we were protecting criminal, and this is not the only one. This happened quite a lot. We were protecting a criminal organization that was actively smuggling drugs into America.
Protecting, but they had the most control of Marseille. Yeah.
That's crazy to
happening right this minute. Yeah. I have no doubt.
It's probably there's some territory we want to control.
North? Like we've done this 1,000 times. We do this every day.
In the 60s, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, annual report estimated that 2,600 to 5,000 pounds of heroin were coming into the United States annually from France. The French traffickers continued to exploit the demand for their illegal product, and by 1969, were supplying the United States with 80% of its heroin. Now, at this point, I don't know if the CIA is still covering for them, but as far as Kickstarters go, I'm going to kickstart my drug company.
Really?
I want my primary backer to be the CIA. I think that's a great idea.
I feel like if you do that, considering the CIA's mission is secret, I feel like kickstarting it is potentially the wrong option.
If you guys will be backers for my heroin smuggling Kickstarter, just type in heroin yay in the chat room, and then we'll know everything is good. There's a tiny bit more. 1970s, The Dismantling. That sounds like a good name for a horror movie right there. The Dismantling.
Well, or police procedural.
I think Kevin Capizzi could do special effects for The Dismantling, and it would be quite scary. In February 1972, French traffickers offered a United States Army sergeant $96,000, equivalent to $586,000 in 2019, to smuggle 240 pounds of heroin into the U.S. He, being a good sort and not working for the FBI or for the CIA, he informed his superior, who in turn notified BNDD. I don't know what that is. We'll get to that. As a result of this investigation, 5 men in New York and 2 in Paris were arrested with 264 pounds of heroin, which had a street value of $50 million.
But at this time in the world, this particular pathway for drugs into the United States, the United States had all the money, right? Then the United States had all the infrastructure. Europe had all the heroin. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
And it's no different than here we are 30 years later, and it's South America that has all the heroin.
Mike says he'll back my Kickstarter for heroin smuggling, but it depends on the stretch goals. I could not agree more. I just got to read you some of the Lucchese crime family members who are involved in this. Of course, you had Giovanni Big John Ormento. He was a capo. Capo or capo? Capo's a thing who goes on a guitar.
Yes. And I bet he wished when he got busted that he was a capo, not a capo.
Salvatore Leproto, Angelo M. Loicano, and then, my favorite, Angelo Little Angie Terniasso, and Pascal Pansy Fuca. Oh, my God. These are great names. These are great names. All right, so there's that. Give me a moment to get back on the script, guys.
Yeah, so it's interesting because this is a movie I have had conversations with 2 friends who are watching it for StorySmack now, completely separate, completely unknown to each other, who said, okay, I tried to watch this, but I couldn't get through. I couldn't. And like felt bad about it. Like, it's a movie. Like, who cares if you don't like it? Who cares?
Right, right.
And yet, it's so storied and Academy Award winning and everything else. And that should be every Academy Award winner should be watchable, right? But that isn't true because the Academy Awards have been around forever, and the people we are in 2020 wildly different than who we were in 1972.
A lot of this, I would say, this movie could have been made no problem up through like 2000, probably 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, with a few adjustments.
And a few adjustments, but now and it's not overt racism, but there's plenty of racism in there. But the thing that's, for example, tripping us up on my book Nocturnal that they're trying to adapt is now the conversation about police brutality has changed so much. So to get this movie made today, to fund this movie today, there's no question, there would have to be a huge script rewrite. They would have to do a lot of different things at Popeye because you can't. We're running as Nocturnals. It's not like Brian Clouser and Pookie Chang are out slapping guys around, but they are, they're wild cards. And some of that stuff that's in the book is getting people twingy in Hollywood and the producers too. Like, we can't, we have to adjust this and dial this down a little bit because of where we are as a culture.
Well, and part of it is also, it's not just the culture. It's, if we get a greenlit today, it maybe gets made in 2023, 2024, where this conversation seems likely to continue for a while too. So it's not exactly who we are today, but with movie making, you got to figure out who you're going to be in the next 5 years.
That's a tough guess. Yeah.
That said, there are, and we won't talk a ton about it, but there, like Scott said, there's a lot of casual racism, which was probably true at the time. There's this interesting scene at a bar that is a predominantly black patroned bar, where Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman come in and they roust them up. They roust them. Yeah, they don't hurt anybody. They arrest a handful of people, or they have the street cops arrest a handful of people, but they're just shitty.
It's just
they're just shitty. They're performing and being that role, that bad cop role.
This is where, to me, it gets interesting, because what they do in this movie is no different than hundreds of other cop movies. It's just when you walk into an all-black bar, and then they are just demeaning to these guys who, a lot of them are just patrons at a bar. At this point in time, you're like, oh, I don't know about this.
Well, and not only that, realistically speaking, they're also the cops' behavior in that bar. No matter who the patrons were, they rough people up, they hit people, they ruffle through their clothes, they take people's wallets and cigarettes and whatever and dump them all into a beer glass and then pour beer in it. And they do all this stuff that wouldn't be acceptable today, and rightfully so, that just, like, literally, nope, not the bartender. There's no one who says, all right, Popeye. Like, nobody does that.
That's old school cops. What did they say about, was it New York? I think it was San Francisco or New York back in the day, when gangs were much more prevalent and much more dominant. The cop forces had a saying that they were the biggest gang in the city. So if you were, because they were mean and nasty and brutal, and some things had to be done at those times to control that level of violence, but we supposedly evolved as a society. But so
that's sort of what I'm saying, is that it's anachronistic. Tracy, you were talking about the same thing. I don't know how a lot of movies would get made today. I do think lots of the movies that we love from before could get made today, but I just think that they would be somewhat sort of somewhat differently framed, I think.
Tracy in the chat room brings up a good point. You go back to Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours, is that redneck hate, etc. He comes in and they roust the bar and do all kinds of illegal shit, which is, if you remade The French Connection exactly the same, except that's a bar full of Italian guys, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I'm not sure anymore that that's true. I'm not sure that
because now the police brutality angle is so much more sensitive.
And progressively speaking, and I don't mean progressive with a capital P. I mean, if you look at the progression of any kind of a state of any ilk, you start with the people in power having all the power, and then you move to there is an equitable distribution of resources among most of the society, right? And then you get to everybody's living high and everybody's living well, and then you start to work on the minorities. You give women the right to own property or vote or shit like that, and things like that. And so that happens through every society. We can look at it 1,000 times. So I do think that we would have a problem with this but I also think it would get made.
Yeah.
It would have to be a little bit different, but hopefully we're learning as a society to be either a little more sensitive to have these difficult conversations, which I don't even think they thought about it being a difficult conversation back in 1972. It's just the way it was.
Not.
But
there's some value in being an edgy, controversial movie that helps with marketing. So they may have had some conversation. But
I don't think so. I don't think they thought they were being edgy at all.
Oh, it's fascinating.
At all.
They thought they'd be in the real. Yeah. All right, now we're going to talk about the problems with the French Connection, and I have a few. I've also learned some valuable storytelling lessons from the French Connection. We're going to talk a little bit about the weird, going back to what A said about this being superficial, the weird plot holes and the off-screen stuff that we don't get to see. The running thread in this movie is Popeye Doyle is desperate for this case to happen. It's his case. He and his partner Cloudy made it happen out of nowhere. They don't want it taken away and given to the feds. And Popeye's had some wrong calls in the past, so he is obsessed. He's begging to be left on this case. He gets taken off the case in a very dramatic scene. And then a bystander gets murdered when a frog 2, perhaps it is, takes a shot at him. And there's no coverage of the civilian injuries or civilian deaths. There's no no reaction or introspective thought at all about a gunfight going out in a open square, and there's no connection between this attack, which there is at least a significant injury, if not a fatality of a civilian, and then all of a sudden back on the case. He's just back on the case.
Oh, yeah.
There's no discussion. There's no like, you're back on, Popeye. He's just boom. He's right back in the next scene.
And this is what we were talking about before. And if you think about it, in the final scene, there's probably 50 cops. Maybe less, maybe 30 cops. Mm-hmm. There is never an interdepartmental phone call, decision, nothing. It's just literally as if Popeye is on or off the case, and the feds are on or off the case, because the feds come in and that's
it's a joint.
It's a point of contention for Popeye Doyle.
Right. Doesn't like them feds.
Yeah. But there's never any kind of a discussion about why and who has jurisdiction, or it's literally just, hey, that guy in that car, we have to chase that guy in that car. Here's 50 people.
And then here's one that you could not do this today. They have the great chase, the classic chase scene with Popeye in a commandeered vehicle chasing the L. And then he shoots a guy in the back on the L platform. And no coverage of that, no comment about that, no nothing. Cop shoots a guy, a perp in the back, and he's and then boom, right back. They don't even mention it. There's nothing.
Also, Popeye Doyle is not visibly a police officer when he does that. He's an undercover detective. He's not wearing his badge like he is at the end, a visible badge at the end. He's just chasing this dude. And he shoots him in broad daylight on a very public street, and no one reacts.
And it's not only does no one react, you guys, this is literally the friggin' movie poster.
Yeah.
There's Popeye Doyle, the star of the movie, shooting a guy in the back in public on a train station stairs, and they don't cover. There's no mention of this.
Nobody even yells.
What? You don't even get, oh, Doyle, if you shoot yet one more guy in the back, I'm going to take away your badge and your gun. I'm going to bust you down to traffic. We don't even get that.
Okay, but the biggest one.
Yeah, the biggest one of all.
The biggest problem of all. You guys.
I wish I'd been high when I watched this. The car. We watched them commandeer the perp's car.
Oh, did we ever tell the why the car is important?
Oh, well,
spoiler alert.
Hopefully you've seen this movie. We're not spoiling it all, but it's worth going back and watching. So the French Connection utilizes a very expensive Lincoln town car, which is brought overseas. What's that?
It's a Buick.
I think it's a Lincoln. Is it Buick?
Sure? Anyway,
it's a Lincoln Buick, and the Lincoln Buick is brought over from France because it's loaded with all damn drugs. And Popeye knows it. I know that car's dirty. I know it. The car's dirty. And they finally get the car with a weird random subplot of some Hispanic gentlemen, we will call them, were trying to steal the car, and they thought that was a big drug bust. They bring the car in, and they tear the car apart. They're cutting carpet. They're bending metal.
They're
breaking
carpet.
Plastic. Yeah, they're not. There's no effort to be like, hold on, I got to get the screw just straight so we can put this back. They shred the car. They're literally parts of it.
They pull out wires.
They're cutting through fabric.
They shred carpet and naugahyde and the foam in the back seat.
Yeah.
And you watch them do it.
Yep.
They take a screwdriver and run along the floorboards and the windshield and stuff, which you would need to reinstall.
Just it's insane. And of course, people in the chat room are mentioning, how did it win so many awards with all these plot holes? And I don't have an answer for you. Except that this is one of my storytelling lessons. I, as a creator, often get bogged down. Got to go back and button up all these details. If this guy did this, people would say this, so I have to at least address this, even if it's just with a line. And in this movie, and it could be because of editing, it might not even be they may have had some of this stuff covered. They just had to cut it out for the edit, and they somehow put the car back together so well that the people, not only the guy who owns the car, who's an actor, we can forgive that. Maybe he doesn't know his car. Maybe he gets a new one every week. But the crooks, the mafia guys, little Joey, and Tommy Pansy, they're not gonna look at this car and find anything wrong with it.
Well, the biggest thing is if it was your car and literally the carpet was shredded, you would know that. And especially if you had jimmied that car to be full of drugs, you'd flip and look at it. Kim Hansen in the chat room asks, why was it not parked on the street anyway? Because it was hiding in plain sight. That was the idea, that this was just, don't go to a dark alley somewhere. Just do that. Once the transaction is done, you'll do it there. And what happens is this other street gang wants to boost all the tires. So it's totally a crime of coincidence that the guys who want to steal the tires show up, and that gets the police involved because it's a bunch of guys trying to boost a car.
But that's really, like, this won an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. Let's let go of the actors. Let's let go of the director. The screenplay itself. I mean, this car has $500,000 worth of smack in it, which by today's numbers is $3.2 million of smack in the car. And Kim is right. They leave the car sitting on a street, and I assumed, both the first and second time I watched, it's been a while since the first time, I assumed the point of this was they leave it on the street for a couple days so that the guys who are taking delivery of the drugs get to scope out and watch, make sure nobody's looking at it, and then they just they take the car and they drive away. But that's not it at all. Well, they actually wind up driving the car to a garage somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's after it gets boosted. So if they hadn't tried to steal the tires, then yes, what you're saying is true. The people who are buying could be like, "Yep, nobody's here, there's no cops, everything's fine, it's all good. I'm gonna take this car." But then the tires start to get boosted, and then the police get involved, and the police impound the car.
Then the criminals switch their plan.
Yes, because they know, at that point, that the New York City Narcotics Department is on their tail. We know Frog One knows
that all along.
Right, so they know, we can't do what we were going to do because obviously the police are watching that car. But, the other thing that I'll say, and this is, I don't know how many of you will agree with me, but a big part of why this won so many Academy Awards back then is we didn't have this kind of access. So all we had was going to the movies on a Saturday night and watching that show and talking about it with your friends and family afterwards. We didn't get to dissect it on YouTube. We didn't get to discuss it on the internet. It had to be people who went and saw that movie and probably only saw it once because you were paying for it. And then they come back and they talk about it, right? So now we are so flooded with information, we become experts that we weren't 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 75 years ago. If you're worried about this Academy Award, watch any movie from the 40s that won an Academy Award.
Good point. Also, I would like to point out, she's wrong about one person. I have been an expert for 712 years in all things. All things. For the first 500 years of my life, I had a lush, luxurious head of hair. The last 200 has been a little rough for me.
I mean, you do have a great beard, though.
I do.
It migrated down so that you didn't get any wrinkles.
I do. If you ever want to see me smile, just ask my wife to throw me a compliment. I can't help it. It's very, very nice.
But this is a thing. I've been talking with a handful of girlfriends. We get together every Monday afternoon on Zoom for an hour, and we've been sort of talking about, in the pandemic, some things have been weird. I keep listening to books I already know and enjoying movies. Like, we just finished watching The Boys last night, and he was like, no, we'll wait for the finale because I haven't seen season 1. And I was like, nope, don't care. Don't care. Because now we're so overwhelmed with information, and, I haven't left this house much in 7 months, so now I'm happy to go with what I know, I'll say. And I think that's what's happening here, this vibe of us having all the information that we want at our fingertips. We could watch the movie, never think about it again. Or we could pick apart every single scene and every single prop and every single actor.
Well, I guess we have to go back and look at what was it up against again? It was up A Clockwork Orange, which is just crazy.
Fiddler on the Roof.
You're not going to compare you're not going to say, well, the French Connection's plot was ridiculous, but A Clockwork Orange's plot, that was nails. No, that and A Fiddler on the Roof, I don't know if you can have plots for a musical. It's crazy.
No, there's a huge plot for that musical.
But I don't know that when it's a musical, I don't know that you're going to worry that the plot is all granular and lines up.
And then the Last Picture Show was absolutely they were wildly different, absolutely character driven, and led by the luminous and young who was in Moonlighting?
Bruce Willis.
And
Sybil Shepherd.
Sybil Shepherd.
Oh, yes.
And it was gorgeous and a much slower thing. So it's an interesting thing to see that the Last Picture Show in this teeny tiny town in Texas set up against the French Connection in this giant city, and Fiddler on the Roof in this weird foreign set. Like, all of that, I think, are things that we get more homogenous the more we have more information.
You know what I just figured out? The Boys had a Fiddler on the Roof reference at the very end of the season closer.
No, it did not. Let's move on.
All right, lady. All right. We are done with this. We have laid our gel of intelligence and our analytical smearing all about a movie that won 5 Academy Awards and has my favorite actor. And now our spread is complete. Next Story Smack, we will be watching, wait for it, Caddyshack. One of the 4 movies, the final 4 of the greatest sports movies of all time. If you have not seen Caddyshack, go watch Caddyshack. I cannot wait for this one. Talk about a movie with a perfect plot that has no plot errors, no lack of continuity. It is a flawless masterpiece of storytelling.
I mean, they do chase a stuffed animal around for 2 hours.
But it's internally consistent.
So thank you guys so much for joining us. You have been watching episode 57 of StorySmack, where we discussed the fraught but fun French Connection. You can always find Scott and I online. You guys know this. You're always here with us. But just in case people are listening on the podcast, Scott is at Scott Sigler on Twitter and Instagram. And his Facebook page is facebook.com/Scott Sigler. I am at @arealgirl on Twitter and at a.real.girl on Instagram. You can find us online at facebook.com/StorySmack. You can watch us stream StorySmack live at facebook.com/Scott Sigler, twitch.tv/Scott Sigler, and youtube.com/Scott Sigler. We would love to have you join the live streams every other Saturday or every Tuesday and Thursday. In addition to StorySmack, the Tuesday and Thursday cast is called Sigler in Place, and you can see it where you're seeing this.
Yep.
Scott also releases unabridged episodes of a serialized novel every week. You can get episodes for free every Sunday via iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or more. Just go to scottsigler.com/subscribe for links. We really hope you subscribe so you can hear Scott's books, see more StorySmack, and watch us twice a week live on Sigler in Place. And we hope that you enjoy more StorySmack goodness with us in the future. That's all we've got. So until next time, we will talk to you.
My car is dirty, I tell you. Irv, what the hell is that? Is that till next time?
Sure. And we will talk to you all real soon.